approaches to sustainable economy, particularly, although everything's relative. I've got Councillor Stoyer next.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming to our committee. It was a very interesting presentation. I would like to ask you about how do you think that we can engage our thriving civil society as an integral part in the delivery of this agenda? Because I can see, and I'm very proud of all the built infrastructure projects that we have on the pipeline across the city, but I don't think that this agenda can become really sustainable until we engage our people on the ground. Thank you.
Yeah, again, I would agree with you. We need to get civil society engaged, and I think we have to recognise that engagement doesn't mean agreement. I mean, that's a good start. I mean, actually having the respect for different people's positions is important. And actually being open to the fact that argument over time changes. Hopefully we're open to the fact that argument over time changes our views. So I think if we went into it, start off with a more courteous view of it, that we didn't polarise things so much. I think journalism really doesn't help this at all. That we polarise debates in the UK. We have a much more adversarial system, and that actually stops engagement. So obviously we know things at the moment that the way the public views politicians. Now I may disagree with almost all the politicians I come across, but almost all the ones I come across are very hard working. So I think they are trying to do something. At the moment, we have a real cynical view of the political process. And I think that is informing, or it's maintaining some of the civil society from not engaging at all. So we have to find some way of overcoming that cynicism. And part of that may be the fact that we need to listen more to civil society. That's not going to be easy, but there are plenty of things that we can try and move into that sort of direction. We need to not just impose on communities, but actually get engaged with the communities. And we see that right across the board. If you want to get civil society involved in a wind farm generation, or possibly a nuclear power station, or a carbon capture and storage plant, that the best thing to do is to talk to them before you put the planning rules in. And yet you talk to a lot of developers, they don't do that at all. They still don't really get there before they go any further in the public. They don't go along and start to talk to the public. And yet where that has been done, a few examples, that's a much better way of engaging. So don't engage in a peripheral manner later on. Always engage right from the beginning with an open view that they may well change our perspective and interpretation of issues. So I think we have to be much more upfront, honest, have greater integrity, and trust them to have good views that may change our views.
Councillor Hacking.
Very thought-provoking presentation. You used the phrase 20th century attitude to solve 21st century problems. Would you say that we need to go perhaps back even further and look at the technologies that arose from the Industrial Revolution, the use of fossil fuels on a massive scale, and perhaps look at a sustainable models of how to change the world, whether it's the Chinese terracing for rice 8,000 years ago, or better use of bacteria and living systems to sustain, food production and those sorts of things. So very radical changes, but perhaps learning from some technologies of the past.
I think both technologies and policies and cultural framings of society, there are lots of things we can learn. But let's also bear in mind that the past is a different place in the future. No time in the past with the 9 billion people, no time in the past with 7 billion people. I'm not sure this figure is quite right, but I think there's more people alive now than have ever died. At least it's something similar to that. So we are not in a place that we've ever been to before. That's not to say we can't learn lessons from it. It does concern me that the climate change is caused by Parsons' turbine in 1890, Ben's diesel engine of 1890, and the Whittle jet engine of about 1936. So these are the reasons we're interested in climate change, and it's because we still use the old technologies. This new laptop is using a turbine designed in 1890. Now they're incrementally improved, but we haven't fundamentally changed our technologies. Now there were great technologies at the time, but we need to be thinking differently. So I do think you're right, there are a lot of lessons from the past. My big difference between the 21st century and the 20th century is that the 20th century was one where we used to reduce things to bits, and we were very successful at that. That's what engineering worked on, arguments what economics worked on, and Manchester was very good at this. So it would analyse a bit and make it much more efficient. What we didn't have, that reductionism that was phenomenally successful in the Industrial Revolution, doesn't allow us to think about systems. And we now have systemic problems. And we don't have the wherewithal intellectually yet, or the tools, or even the mindsets or philosophies to really think about systems. And if we don't think about systems, we will fail. So we have to start to move away from that. Systems are not optimized, systems are compromisers, and they evolve, they iterate. So we have to accept this world that is not perfect, and it will evolve, and we have to, how can you make it adapt to the changing world that, which, you know, it will be hit by sideswipes from elsewhere, climate change might come in there, you know, we will change in lots of respects, so don't lock ourselves in to a vision from the past that we're going to try and impose in the future. So it's this shift from reductionism, from analysing bits to analysing the system, and that's why I tried to frame it around the issue of the airport, which often is seen as a bit, but think of it as part of a system, and you may come up with different outcomes, different conclusions.
Members, for this part of the meeting, I'm just going to bring in Councillor Chappell, and after that, I'm going to invite Mark to speak, because we've got quite a lot to get through. And just for members, in terms of recommendations that might come out at the end of the meeting, we have got a paper a bit later on to revisit recommendations that came out at the conference that we held. So I suspect that in the review of those, recommendations that may be coming out of these discussions we can take at that point as well. So Councillor Chappell, and then I'm going to invite Mark. Oh, sorry, did you have a follow-up? You have another question? I'll have to be very brief, but I'll bring Councillor Chappell in first.
Thank you for the presentation, and I think I'm beginning to get the picture more and more, and beginning to get the fear more and more, as I'm sure everyone else is too. The thing that I still can't quite grasp is, what do we as councillors, council officers, a city have to do tomorrow? What's the most important thing that we have to sit down and do when we leave this meeting? What would you do if you're in our position as councillors or as a council? And if that question is just too broad and too difficult, can you point us to a couple of examples of really tangible best practice from other local authorities or cities that you think we should be getting on and doing immediately?
That's a great question. The first thing I would do, because you can do it immediately, is lead by example. And actually, I would say you should be putting that back at university as academics, because those of us who work on climate change, our emissions keep going up year on year, which is atrocious in my view, and totally unforgivable. So we should be leading by example in our own lives, but also within our council lives. So we should, it's not just leading by example, but unfortunately we have to shout about it. So it's one of those occasions where we have to be quite vociferous about what we're doing, even if we might feel that quite uncomfortable to say that I'm doing this, I'm doing that. We've got to let other people, getting our bike helmets out, that sort of thing. So I think we have to do that, and that's challenging. But you can imagine as a council, they could do a whole suite of things in terms of, I don't know all the controls council has, but some of the things it will have immediately will be some of the travel arrangements it has for its own staff, what it does there, car parking, those sorts of things. You may start asking some questions around that. Does anyone travel first class? If you travel first class, it's much higher emissions. So you just ban first class or business class. You shouldn't. So there are things you can do immediately which actually could have a hit in the paper. And I think again we should do that at university. I don't think it's appropriate for our VC to park their 4.2 litre Jag in the middle of the quad in the university. That to me is not certainly a good example of the university is trying to be sustainable. So there are plenty of good examples where we can make immediate changes that can hit the press. And you have press people here, so have them people make sure that what you're doing is visible. And that starts at least to change the agenda. Beyond that, I think the real trick is to actually, and it's hard for us all here, and I tried to allude to it earlier, this idea of systems thinking. We've got to start to escape the bits within which we work. And we've spent years with independent cost centres, so the capital budget is different to the operational budget, and we still struggle to bring those things together. Universities have different departments. The world isn't split up into physics and chemistry and social sciences. The government's split up into departments. The world isn't split like that. So we've got to find a way of bringing those together. So climate change is not about a particular group, and I know we've just changed how it's framed in the council anyway. It's about infusing all of the elements of what the council does, but then so is equity. So we need to find a better way of actually coming together and again, trusting each other and working across the boundaries. And so that is, I think, the most important thing the council should be trying to do, along with the university, is trying to say, how do we do that? Because I think unless we can actually do that, it's going to be very challenging. Are there good examples out there? There are good examples at piecemeal levels. So you can see some good things that occur around the UK and at a global level, but they're just piecemeal. So you find a good bit here, then you find a bad bit over there.